Hear me. And we've had some fun this week. We've had some real fun. And it's kind of continuing now. I just want to point out a few things just in case the day doesn't quite go to plan. It's amazing, isn't it? If I'm such a friggin' loony, and I'm quite admit to that, I mean, you have to be called insane in this world for confirmation of your own flippin' sanity, it seems to me, because this world's bloody mad. But if I'm such a lunatic and what I'm saying is such a flippin' nonsense, then why all this attention on me? Because continuing now, we've got all this stuff, all week and stuff. And the one thing I kind of didn't like was when they threw pies at me, it was like lemon meringue. My mother was trying to get me to eat lemon meringue all my childhood. I hated the stuff, you know, and it'd get thrown at me. It must be symbolic and synchronistic or something. But I had well, can we turn the mic up? Is that possible? I had an interesting arrival in Vancouver, which is very relevant to today, just to fill you in. I had a real problem getting in Toronto last time. They kept me at immigration and stuff till 2 o'clock in the bloody morning. So this time, we went to immigration lawyers, found exactly what was necessary for me to come and speak. So I arrived with a Radio 4, or a Channel 4 rather, television film crew from Britain to go through Vancouver immigration. Now, a very strange thing happened. Because when we got to immigration, the big hall, you know, at Vancouver Airport, it was like empty. And there was like 6 or 7 people in the immigration booths, right? And the biggest queue was 2 people. So we turn up and we stand behind one person waiting to go to the next immigration booth, right? Suddenly, this guy appears out of nowhere like he kind of manifested and calls us over to an empty booth, opens it up, and I've never gone through immigration so quick. I told him and the witnesses there exactly what I'd come to do. Speak like this and all that. I said, here's my papers. He said, witness will confirm it. Oh no, don't want to look at those. In fact, I can't even remember him punching me in the flipping computer. I've never been through so quick. And then I get through, and as I turn around, the guy's getting out of the booth and walking off. He's opened it just for me. I'm thinking things are looking up. Now there's a guy from immigration in this theater with about 3 policemen wanting to see the papers they didn't want to see when I arrived 10 days ago. Because if you can't stop an event by hurling lies and abuse at somebody and trying to intimidate venues and radio stations into stopping you having a platform, then play your final card if you can. So we'll see how today unfolds. If it doesn't unfold, you'll have confirmation that Canada, which masquerades as freedom, is in effect, like my country and America, a fascist state in disguise. So there. It's funny, you know. What kind of happens when you say something that's really outside the norm is people tend to hear only the first line. You see the Georgia Strait this week? Lizard people run the world. We've always known it. Right? Now, when you hear that, you go, understandably, from the conditioned view of reality, he's bloody mad. He's the bloody lizard people running the world. And that's where it ends, you see. They go back to watching The Price is Right. You get back to reality, you know. Right. So, but when you add a little bit of information to that opening line, maybe it doesn't sound quite so bizarre and ludicrous as it seems at first hearing. I'll give you an example. A few centuries ago, when people delivered the opening line that blew people away, the earth is round, people said, you're bloody mad, don't be so stupid, it can't be round, the people on the bottom would fall off. Right, opening line, bloody mad. And then you said, excuse me, can I have a word with you about the law of gravity, like, you know what I mean? Oh, really? Then it doesn't look so stupid once you know the law of gravity. If you don't, it sounds ridiculous. So what we're going to do today is go on a chronological story And that's not just a chronological story, in fact. I'm going to tell it in the order it happened. Right? Oh, that's not bad. We're awake. And I'm going to talk about a mass of things which, taken in isolation, is bloody mad. Put together, and it won't be completed, this cycle, until my last word, suddenly it all starts to fit. No one more than me found it more bizarre with the stuff that I've come across. And I'm into information, right? That's all I am. I tell you for why. Information is a very, very good thing, you know. It can save you a lot of trouble. I found this card. There's this monkey here, you see, hanging here. And this monkey has just hit the ground at a terrible rate of knots. Now, if you'd have listened to this guy and his information, he wouldn't have done that, because this guy's saying, I've told you 100 times, don't scratch your ass with both ends, you know. And so... and what we're basically saying today is don't scratch your ass with both ends. This is information, and I'll make this point. Not only do I not care what people make of what I say, it's none of my business. How can I stand here with such arrogance and say, this is my research, this is all true, you must believe it, and if you don't, you're wrong. None of us have got all the answers, but we've all got some of them. And I say this to those who talk about being anti-fascist while acting in the very ways the fascists did in Nazi Germany by destroying the ability of another voice to have a say, a voice at that time, incidentally, that was warning about what the Nazis would do if they got to power. If we really believe in freedom, then let's have freedom for all to express their view, even if, call the police and Canadian immigration, even if people are saying something we don't actually agree with. Oh my goodness me, arrest them. So, all I'm putting out here today is information. What people make of it is up to them. And if anyone walks out of this theater, beautiful theater tonight, and says, everything that man says is true, every last detail, I'm the most disappointed man in the place, because I've got more questions than probably anyone in here, this room has got about what the hell's going on. I'm just on a journey, and this is an interim report, and it's staggering new information, which you'll see if you've heard me speak before. Now, we're in a kind of situation with this... we're in... I'm such a card. Hey, have you heard the latest about Clinton? The Roman Catholic Church has got involved. They've issued a Clinton commandment, the 11th commandment. Thou shalt not comfort thy rod with thy staff. One of the pieces of information we're going to be looking at, and one of the questions we're going to be seeking to answer today, is how people like Bill Clinton and others of like mind become presidents of the United States and get into the positions of power over millions and millions of people. And why, one might ask, are they all flipping related? And related to the very royal and noble lines, noble it says here, aristocratic lines of Europe, which ruled Europe all that time. And the same lines ruled Africa and all that stuff. So we'll be looking at that question. And the question moves on to, why is this guy front-running to be the next president of the United States? George W. Very bright man. I always quote him on his education policy. What we need to ask is our children learning? That's what he said. The Dan Quayle of the new millennium, you know. Dan Quayle, when he came back from South America, he said, I love Latin America. I just wish now I'd have studied Latin at school so I could converse with these people. It's a strange world that people like this come to power, because They are not elected by ballot. They are selected by blood, and that advances and attracts the money that allows you to become elected. And when I say about bloodlines, let me emphasize from the start, I am not talking about bloodlines that relate in any way whatsoever to Earth races as we know it. They work through all of them, particularly my own, which is my own. Let's take the flipping world over. Now, I don't know whether you saw that. I came across this program. I think it's brilliant. 22 minutes. Have you come across that? Well, I saw this great clip the other day. I thought I'd share it with anyone who's not seen it. You know this guy can't remember world leaders? Yeah? Well, they went along to one of his primaries, 22 minutes, and they asked him about the Canadian Prime Minister, which, for people watching this video version of this, is Jean Chrétien, or Chrétien, or Crétin, or something like that, you know what I mean? But they went along and questioned Bush and his aides as if the Prime Minister of Canada was Jean Poutine, which translates, apparently, I'm coming from secondary knowledge here, as French fries with cheese. Something like that. So, let's see. This image, which I found in an advertisement, obviously for vodka. Cool, I just fancy one of them, actually, to be honest. Give one to the immigration guy, cheer him up. Here you have all these sheep, and in the middle, with greatest respect to wolves, which are a wonderful, wonderful animal, but symbolically here, in the middle of it, is a wolf in sheep's clothing. That is how the Illuminati, the illuminated ones, the network that have manipulated the world for so long, manipulate the world. You can't control billions of people physically to put people like George W. Bush and Bill Clinton into power. You have to manipulate the way they think and feel. We had a couple of pigs in England a couple of years ago who they were being brought into the slaughterhouse, and they thought, sod this for a lot, this is no fun, and they made a run for it, right? Now, these two pigs ended up on the front pages of the national newspapers and in the national television news bulletins, because it took the might of the British Empire 5 to 6 days to catch these friggin' pigs, because catching something physically and controlling it physically is a nightmare, but you don't have to. The way the scam is played, and always has been played, is to manipulate the way we think and feel so we perceive the world and therefore behave in ways that the agenda wants us to. And, you know, when people first hear this line, a few people control the world, it kind of, again, like, it's lizard rule the world. It just seems ridiculous. There's billions. Apparently there's 6 billion people. Who counts the buggers? I've always wondered that. Excuse me, over here. No, don't keep moving. Why? You know, I can't understand that. Can't understand that at all. Anyway, there's apparently 6 billion, so I'm told. I heard it on CNN, you know, claptrap, no news. It must be true, you know. The criminal news network. And Ted Turner's very good to his mother, you know, never goes home. But you don't have to do it that way physically. You do it mentally and emotionally. And when you first hear that line, few people control the world, it seems crazy. But you know the sad thing? Not only is it possible, if you control certain institutions and certain flows of information, it's a piece of cake. And it works like this. If you look at a sheep herd, a herd of sheep, you try to control them physically. You can't do it. You need 6 or 7 blokes for every sheep. They wouldn't be guaranteed to catch it even then, if they express their uniqueness. I am me, I am free, I'm munching here and I'm staying, but that doesn't happen. I've seen it happen, we've all seen it happen. Suddenly, the farmer arrives with the sheepdog and stuff, and suddenly 1 or 2 or 3 of these sheep start to walk. And then it's like friggin' Exodus. They're all going, ba, 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 ba. Well, always follow him, you know. And if any of those sheep shouted at the one in front, "Excuse me, where you going?" He'd probably turn around and go, "I don't know, really, I just..." But we follow, don't we? Don't follow me, I'm lost. And so, then you have the few of the sheep here and there who don't fancy just following the one in front. Hold on, I'm all right here, you know. And then the sheepdog comes in, symbolizing fear. And then they're in line. And this combination of bar and fear, the prison with the bars, is what controls herds of sheep all over the world every day. And if we're honest, as a human race, a human family, if we look at ourselves, we find that not only are we controlled by bar and fear, most people following the one in front, and then for those who've sussed that it's all a scam, or at least we want to do something else with our lives, the fear of what other people think of us being different keeps out those people in line also. So that combination of bar and fear, which sorts sheep out, sorts sheeple out also. But we've gone one step further, you see. We've out-sheeped the sheep because we've dispensed with the sheepdog. We police each other. What happens is that the symbolic wolf sets the norms in society. What is considered right and wrong, moral and immoral, sane and insane, possible or impossible. That sets the mental and emotional sheep pen, which the vast majority of people spend their entire physical existence in because they're not thinking for themselves. Oh, well, he's a professor, our Dave. He must know what he's talking about. He's at the University of British Columbia. You know, must be bright, you know. Not the bugger I met one, I'll tell you, but there we go. Anyway. And then you've got the people who see that that mental and emotional sheep pen of norms is actually limiting and at its extreme, calculatedly manipulating. But most of them still live their lives within it because they're terrified of what the other people who've given their minds away to the pen will do if they escape from it. The sheep are policing the sheep. You step out of line. Take this as an example. You get to the edge of this hassle-free zone. You know that if you go any further in your lifestyle and your view, that you're going to get hassled and ridiculed and condemned for the crime, and that's what it's become, of being different. And you know, any society in which it is a crime to be different is a fascist society, because it means whoever sets the norms runs the friggin' world. So you're on the edge of that hassle-free zone, and you've gone as far as you can, and you know you're going to get trouble if you go any further. What's going through those people's minds? Fear of what Bill Clinton will think if they go any further? No. Gives a shit. Fear of what John Poutine thinks? No. Fear of what will my mother say? What will the guys down the bar say? What will the people at work say if I express my uniqueness and get out of the pen? In other words, we are being policed by those who have given their minds away, who are putting pressure on us to do the same. Now, I have no problem whatsoever, and I say that to the people who've been protesting this week. I have no problem whatsoever with them saying about me whatever they like. Be my guest. Whatever they say, I've had worse. And I don't have a problem with anyone giving their mind away to norms. That's a choice, and if we're going to talk about freedom, we must be free to do that also. It's not that which allows the few to control the world, although it makes it easier. The line that is crossed that makes the few able to run the world is when we cross the line of not only giving our mind away to norms, but insisting that everyone else does the same. That's the line we cross. And I've got a clip now in 30 seconds which sums up. I've just gone into the darkness. You see that? Let there be light. I think that guy's on the gin. This is from... That's how it's done. It is literally that simple. And then you go to the next stage. The idea is to take human consciousness, multidimensional infinity. There is no we, there's just one gigantic I, which is what, in the end, when you come from that spiritual perspective, makes racism not only grotesque, but utterly friggin' daft. It's just a body which eternal, infinite spirit, which we all are, is using to experience this world for a short time. If you can open that consciousness to infinity, you look through the same eyes and hear through the same ears, but what you see, and people in this audience will very much understand, suddenly transforms. You're not seeing what other people are seeing anymore. The idea, therefore, has been to use fear to put us in these eggshells where we shut out all that consciousness which is screaming at us to get in, so we express our uniqueness, and we're going, oh my goodness, what will my mother say? What about the people at work? No, no, no. The eggshell of fear, which is an expression of the hassle-free zone within our very being. And then we go to the next stage. Once you have created that zone, that mental emotional sheep pen, the herd mentality, you then break the herd up into warring factions. Now, because within those norms there are no opposites, because it's so narrow and limited, you have to invent them so you can play them off against each other. If someone can tell me the difference between a Christian priest, a Jewish rabbi, an Islamic religious person, a Hindu religious person, or anyone imposing their version of life on their children or anyone else at the exclusion of all other information, then I'd like to know the difference. It's just the same state of being with a different dress on and a different name on the door. It is an opposame, not an opposite. And it's the same in politics. I'll give you a great opposame. During the Second World War, on the far left, as symbolized by Joseph Stalin in Russia, was into centralized control, military dictatorship, and, oh yes, concentration camps. Now, they were played off, because they're left-wing, you see. They were played off from the far, against the far right, as symbolized by Adolf Hitler, and he, of course, was into something very different, because he's far right and he's far left. Adolf Hitler was into centralized control, military dictatorship, and, oh yes, concentration camps. And these were played off against each other, and people still think they're opposites. Tell me the opposite of the fascist mentality of stopping those they don't want to have a public platform from having it. It's the desire, surely, to let everyone have a public platform so everyone has freedom of speech. But when you go to the opposite spectrum of that, you find that. Shut him up! I don't agree with him. We are so full of self-delusion. We're actually frightened of freedom. The freedom to passionately campaign for those we disagree with to have the same rights that we do. So once you've got that hassle-free zone and you have to break it up into warring factions, then you have a situation of divide and rule, which is exactly the situation you always need, foundation, if a few are going to control the many. And I'll give you an example. This is why anyone that steps out of the pen publicly is jumped upon massively, because the system is terrified of the threat of a good example. This is why anyone that offers a different vision of possibility to the norms is jumped upon from a great height, because it's so dangerous to exposing there are other levels of possibility. And I don't know whether you've seen this movie, Bug's Life, but I'm just going to show you a clip now, which sums up so profoundly what I'm talking about. It's a very profound film. It's kind of an animated film and all that stuff. It's supposed to be, for kids, I suppose, but it's so profound. The story, for those who haven't seen it, is there's an ant colony at a place called Ant Island. And these ants, these endless number of ants, symbolic, of course, of the human race. But these small few grasshoppers who are dictating to the ants. Every year, these grasshoppers go to Ant Island to collect the food which the ants have spent the whole year collecting, not for themselves, Sea tribes in black Africa and black people in Africa who are having empty bellies as I speak while the food-growing land is growing cocoa for the Western chocolate industry. These ants collect the food. The grasshoppers, the few, come, collect it, go away. They start again, and the whole process goes on. Now, 1 year, one ant stood up and spoke out against these grasshoppers and what they were doing. Just one ant. That's the start of a domino effect that people have to jump on if you want to keep the status quo. The scene you're going to see, these grasshoppers are in their winter quarters. They've got all the food they need for the winter. They don't have to go to Ant Island. So they're saying, hey, to the leader, we don't have to go to Ant Island. What do we need all that food for? Those ants have collected. We've got enough. We don't have to expend ourselves. And people say to me, why do the Rockefellers and all these people who've got more money than they could spend in 100 lifetimes, why do they go on accumulating more? Because the financial system is not geared just to make the few wealthy. It's geared to be used to control people's ability to make life decisions. That's why it's there. It's about keeping people in line. Now, when it is suggested to this grasshopper chief there's no need to go to Ant Island because they've got enough, he then tells them the facts of life if you're the few who want to control the many. And it's an extremely profound clip. Let's run it. That's the way it works. And it works so brilliantly, it works so simply. All genius is simple, and on the level it operates, this manipulation is genius on a mental level. The idea is to frighten us into keeping quiet. But I say this to the people who try to stop me speaking this week, people who try to stop me speaking in Toronto, people who try to stop me speaking all over the world, the immigration guy who may be still here. This is one ant. You cannot shut up, and I will not be silenced by anybody, because this is a wonderful time to be alive, because you know, I've said over the years, you know, this is going to be sorted, this is going to be sorted, and I've believed it passionately, but you always have, well, is it? Over the last couple of years, particularly over the last year, a very profound change has taken place. Many groups of which have confirmed this by what they've been doing in this part of Canada. We have stopped running. I saw a headline, was it in Conrad Black's National Post or Vancouver Sun? He owns the bloody lot anyway, but there was a big headline, a big picture of Chrétien. You see it this week? And the headline was, Chrétien, I'm running. And you're not going to be alone in the next few years, darling, I'll tell you. Because what's happened is we've been running away. Oh, my goodness me. Oh, this is the system, and oh, it's the immigration, oh, it's revenue Canada, and oh, my goodness, oh, what will my mother think? More and more people have gone, hold on a minute. You depend on your power on me running. Have some of this. And people have started running at this system. And we've started to see that what seems to be an all-powerful edifice is actually a house of cards, and the house of cards is coming down. It's a wonderful, wonderful time to be alive. So, what we're going to look at today is what comes out of this manipulation of the human mind. One of the great things that has been used to condition us is what we call the education system. I love that. The way they use words, isn't it? Indoctrination system. Can't call it that. That's just what's going on. Education system. Gandhi once was asked what he thought of Western civilization, and he said, I think it would be a very good idea. And the way the education system works, I think it would be a very good idea if we had some, is to turn people into left-brain prisoners. And I'll just give you an example. I'm now going to describe the examination system and the school college system, you know, because we're very bright, you see. What you do, as conventional science has accepted and the whole thing, that we have two sides of the brain. One, that's logic, worldview, the left brain, physical worldview, intellect. Can I see it, touch it, taste it? Oh, it exists then. And this is the inspiration, the bigger picture, the intuition, the filter of that. The idea of the education system, and indeed the whole system in general, is to turn us into left-brain prisoners so we're disconnected from higher levels of ourselves. So this is exams. You pour loads and loads of stuff, much of which is provable crap, particularly the history and all that stuff, into the left brain. And you say to these students, you know, you hold it there, darling, just for a little while. And then someone comes along in the class and they say, ladies and gentlemen, you have 2 hours to complete this paper. Please pick up your pens. At which point, you have to spew this garbage out onto a page. Now, if you do it well enough, sponge out, in, sponge out, you pass your exams and you become very successful. My little girl's very good at school, you know, pass her exams, going to university. Poor sod. And you're successful in this system. Come on, yeah. Now what happens? If you are I am me, I am free, you take all this stuff into the left brain and you pass it over to the right brain. And the right brain looks at it and goes, ah, it's a piece of shit. If you then regurgitate the fact that it's a piece of shit onto your exam paper with provable support, you fail your flipping exam. The whole system's set up for the system to say, tell me what I want to hear and you'll be okay. Tell me what I don't want to hear and I'll jump on you. So what we're going to do today, we have this smoke screen in front of us. You know, this is reality. Oh, yeah. We're going to have a look behind and see what's really going on. Symbolized magnificently by this wonderful card I found. This is a peacock. This is a peacock projecting an illusion. But these 2 women peacocks have seen through it. Cut the crap and show us your willy. So what we're going to do today is look at this system there and say, cut the crap and show us whatever you got. Going to be a laugh. This is the mechanism by which throughout history, this goes back so long, the few have always controlled the many. You set up a structure, a compartmentalized structure. Secret societies are wonderful for this, and the ancient mystery schools also, not all of which were malevolent by any means. I'm talking about the way this Illuminati has worked. You hoard significant knowledge at the top of the pyramid, and you keep the people in ignorance of that knowledge. If I know significant things that you don't know, you are in a position where I can manipulate you. If you know the same as me, because we have the free flow of information, then manipulating becomes very, very much more difficult. So over the period I'm talking about, literally thousands of years to today, a structure has been created in which significant knowledge is hoarded there, and it's passed over through initiation and other secret networks only to those chosen to have it, and the people are kept in ignorance of it. This is one of the key reasons why when the European nations, i.e. the Illuminati manipulated European nations, because it's European-centered at operational level, when they went into Africa, into the Americas, into Australia, and into the Asia as far as China, one of the key things they did under the guise of Christianity and destroying Satan was to destroy ancient knowledge and ancient accounts of history, because they wanted to keep the people in ignorance of what had happened and what was happening and even the true nature of who they are spiritually. And they've done it magnificently and hoarded it there. And I'll give you a quick example of the kind of stuff that's held there and not kept in the public arena. About 2 or 3 years ago now, I was invited through a third party to meet this guy in North America who works for the CIA as a scientist. He is an expert in magnetics, which is a cutting-edge area of expertise now. He told me the story of how he joined the CIA thinking he was serving his country, because most people, you know, people say, it's the Freemasons, it's the so-and-so. It's not it's the anything. Most Freemasons don't know their arse from the friggin' elbow in terms of what's going on in the world and how their organization's being used. They're totally innocent of it. Not all of them by any means, but the majority. But they need that unknowing majority to smokescreen what's going on behind the scenes. So he told me that he joined the CIA thinking he was serving his country. And one day, because he realized that his technology and knowledge was being used to advance this very agenda I'm exposing today, that he rebelled and he refused to work anymore. One day, he has missing time. He remembers leaving home, nothing else. Next thing he remembers, he's lying on this medical-type bench. And as he got his faculties back and woke up, he realized there was something on his chest. And as he was telling me this story, he opened his shirt. And on his chest was this see-through plastic with sachet, almost like a see-through shampoo sachet. And in it was this orangey golden liquid. And he said, what they did is they've manipulated my body to need this drug to survive, and it has to be replaced every 72 hours. And if he does not do as he's told and use his genius for malevolent reasons, then this is not replaced and he starts to die. And he's got kids. He wants to see them grow up. And he's not alone. And what he told me is that up there is the technology that can create abundant growth in deserts without water, using magnetics and resonating the natural energy fields and vibrational fields of the earth and indeed the plant itself. That free energy technology, which would mean we have no more utility bills, is known and has been known for decades. The cure for cancer has been known for decades. Why are these things kept out of the public arena? Because if there were no empty bellies, if everyone had abundance, which this planet could provide, if we ran it right and shared it outright, if we had abundance, we would have choice. Abundance equals choice, choice equals freedom. So they manipulate scarcity because scarcity equals dependency and dependency equals control. And if you have enough have-nots, then that frightens the friggin' life out of those who have, because they see what happens if they don't serve the system. You'll become one of them. It's all fear and manipulation. And so when I started to understand, particularly with a book called And the Truth Shall Set You Free, which incidentally was funded by a Jewish friend of mine in England, I'm going to wake up at the end of this week and I'm going to be lying in bed in London or Los Angeles somewhere. I'm going to think, well, that was a strange dream. I don't know. Anyway, I thought I was in Vancouver. Isn't it strange? When I started to see how this system worked, towards the end of the day when we tell this chronological story and we get right into the modern world, I'm going to explain how this system works. It's ever so simple how a few can manipulate all the different institutions. I started to think, well, when the hell did this start? Because you know, this couldn't have been put together in 5 years or a few decades. It had to go back a very, very long way. So I started going back and back and back. And I got right back into the ancient world before I was picking up anything like an origin to this. And I'm probably nowhere near the start. It's just a kind of a point where you can pick it up and go with it. But it probably goes back further than that. And what you find when you get back there is that the idea that far back in the ancient world there were just primitive people is utterly, utterly ludicrous. But if you establish and you reveal publicly in mainstream that they weren't just primitive people, and in fact there was some very, very advanced technological knowledge back there, then the whole house of cards of conventional history starts to fall. You don't want that. As George Orwell said in his book 1984, words to the effect, he who controls history controls the present, and he who controls the present controls history. In other words, if you control the writing of history, you can give people a false fix of where they've come from, therefore giving them a false fix of where they are. That's why the rewriting of history has been so important, and that's why the destruction of historical accounts all over the world has been, and the destruction of them has actually been so important. So I started to go back, and when you realize that back in the ancient world was phenomenal knowledge as well as no knowledge, suddenly some questions start to be answered, some mysteries. And mysteries are very important, you know. It's great mysteries, because if something comes to light that demolishes your version of life or history, and you say, well, if that's true, mate, what about that? You go, it's a mystery. It's lovely. I just keep it, it's a mystery. Oh, it's a mystery. And you leave it there, because then you can concentrate with your vision of life. And so one of the things that I hear from the academics is that there was just these primitive people in the ancient world. The question, therefore, is, who built these buggers then? Simple question. What the academics say, you'll say, because, you know, we academics also. We academics of universities like Cambridge and Oxford and British Columbia, you know, we're very, very clever, you know, very bright indeed, very bright. And we've had a discussion, you'll see, and we've come to the conclusion, you'll see, that these pyramids were built like this, you'll see. These pyramid things, you'll see. What they did, you'll see, is they built these ramps, you'll see. No, I'm not kidding. They built these ramps, you'll see. I know they had to use as much stone to build the ramps as they did the pyramids, but we don't go into that because it gets a bit complicated. They built these ramps, you'll see, and then they pushed their stones, their little stones, yes, 270 tons, some of them, quite right, up their ramps, you'll see, and they built their pyramids. Very clever, but very primitive, right? There is enough stone staring at you to build 30 Empire State Buildings. There is enough stone to build a wall around the entire perimeter of France, which is a friggin' big country. There's enough, or the stone in the Great Pyramid weighs around 6.5 million tons. The idea that primitive people built that is off the flippin' planet. This is Peru, right? 440 tons this sodding thing is. I mean, Bill and Fred down the builder's yard have moved that in, haven't they? Oh, come on, Fred, bit more. 440 tons. And when you look at the way that these ancient structures all over the world, and interestingly, the older the structure, the more amazing it is. Obviously, some knowledge was lost the nearer we got to the modern world. I mean, I've only seen some of these documentaries recently, which is not exposing the manipulation, but just looking and asking the question, who the hell built these things? But they've shown that this phenomenal workmanship and the techniques are found all over the world. There was some kind of global knowledge way back in the ancient world. I mean, you know, Fred and Bill have hit this with an hammer, haven't they? Look at it. I mean, it's just magnificent. That's just one stone. This is a place called Baalbek in the Lebanon. To build this, they had to put 3 chunks of stone, they're called the trilithon, each of which weigh 800 tons in this structure, and this one's 20 foot high up in a wall. There's another one that's 1,000 tons, which, so I read, is about 3 jumbo jets. Primitive people did this. When you keep going through, this is, if it bloody changes. There you go. Oh, yeah, this is... Oh, sorry, I slipped that one in. This is Jean Chrétien. That's a mistake. Sorry. No. This is Easter Island, the mystery statues, look. I mean, some people might wish that was Chrétien because that weighs 10 tons, apparently. You know what I mean? Actually, it's more like Al Gore. He's also got some constipation. You know, keep trying, Gert. You're all right. You'll be all right. You look at the Nazca lines in Peru, where with one continuous line, they scored away the top surface over vast areas of the Nazca Plains and created these amazing depictions of animals and spiders and insects. Fantastic, one line. And these were only seen in their entirety, some of them, in the middle of this century, just before the last war, when people were starting to fly over them, because some of these things can only be seen in their entirety from 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet. And on a hillside in Britain, in Dorset, you've got amazing confirmation of the prophecy abilities of ancient people. Because these people clearly knew that Bill Clinton was going to come at some point. Do you know, that's actually, it's reminded me. Do you know what they call Bill Clinton's Willie in the White House now? They call it the presidential clock. No, clock, madam, clock. You know why they call it the presidential clock? Because it's always got two hands in the face. No, I must not be kidding. Always got two hands in the face. No. That was rude, Dave. You stop that. Okay, right. He's a member of the club, look. Actually, talking to clocks, guy goes to heaven, sees St. Peter. St. Peter shows him around. And he sees this field of clocks in heaven. And they're all going around at different speeds. And he says to Peter, what are that field of clocks? He says, well, everyone's got a clock when they go to the earth. And every time they tell a lie, the clock moves quicker, you'll see. Because St. Peter obviously went to British Columbia University or Oxford or something. I've only got one accent, you see. You'll get that. Anyway, so he said, well, that's interesting, he said. But what's that clock over there going round like an aircraft propeller? He says, oh, that's Bill Clinton's, he said. We use that as a fan. The question then came and comes, where did this knowledge come from that built these phenomenal structures that conventional archaeology and history does not want to look at because of where it would lead? This area of the world, what we now call Turkey, down through what is now Israel, Syria, encompassing Egypt, round including Iran, Iraq, and up to the Caucasus Mountains. Out of this area came phenomenal knowledge. Sumer is, by conventional history, supposed to be one of the cradles or the cradle of civilization, extremely advanced. Babylon, down here, the same. Egypt, the same. And what's interesting about these amazing societies in the ancient world is that they went the opposite direction to how societies normally go. Normally, you start at this level, and through learning, trial and error, experience, you grow to greater levels of knowledge and understanding. They went like this. They started at their peak and then gradually fell away. Obviously, at this point, there was a massive infusion of knowledge. From where? So when I got back in the ancient world and I'm scanning around, I had two things in mind. One, where did this knowledge come from and when did this manipulation start? And secondly, why are the ruling families of the world today, whether it's the British royal family and the aristocracy of Europe or the Eastern establishment families of the United States, why are they obsessed with interbreeding with each other? It's not just snobbery. You go back as far as you want, these families have interbred incessantly. Why? What's the game? It's not just snobbery. So you go back and you ask the question, who were these gods in the endless ancient accounts? The gods that brought knowledge, the gods that brought civilizations of various kinds. The gods that endless accounts say, including the Old Testament in Genesis. The gods, or the sons of the gods, who interbred with humanity, creating hybrid bloodlines. The Old Testament calls them the Nephilim. But that's just one expression of a constant theme around the world. And for anyone who has a problem with the existence of life off this planet, that's just a little bit of the Milky Way galaxy. Conventional science suggests there are at least 1 billion planets, even in that vision of possibility, and 1 billion trillion stars. The idea that life as we know it has only evolved on this one little planet in one little solar system seems to me to be ludicrous. But when you talk about it, what do you get? He's bloody mad, he is. He thinks there's other life in the universe that's more intelligent than me. You know. And you're giving it, look, darling, I've seen cups of coffee more intelligent than you. We don't have to go off planet for this. And when you go and scan these ancient accounts, and my goodness me, I've only done a bit of it. There's so much. You find these recurring accounts. This is just part of something which has become known as the Sumerian tablets. In 1850, in what we now call Iraq, tens of thousands, and more were found later, of clay tablets were found that were buried, it's estimated, around 2000 BC, but they tell stories that go back thousands and thousands of years. They relate to that same area of the world, Sumer, between the Euphrates and the Tigris rivers, in what we now call Iraq, and that area that later became known as Assyria, same area. And in these tablets, as they've been increasingly translated, they tell, this is just one example of what I'm talking about, the story of a race of gods called the Anunnaki, which I understand from translators in Sumerian means those who from heaven to earth came. And it tells how these Anunnaki brought advanced knowledge, took over control, and interbred with humanity, creating hybrid bloodlines. And the hybrid bloodlines were put into the positions of ancient ruling royal power. Now, what do we talk about? What have we talked about all the way through the centuries? We talked about this thing about the divine right to rule. The divine right to be king or queen or leader as a result of your bloodline. And the more you research this, you find this has nothing to do with the divine, all that is, the gigantic I. It is to do with God's. In Genesis, where it talks about the sons of God interbreeding with the daughters of men, creating the Nephilim, when you go back to what that was translated into English from, it says the sons of the gods interbred with the daughters of men, creating the hybrid line, the Nephilim. And they even talk in the Sumerian tablets of how some of the first interbreeding was done by what we would call test tube methods. Now, in 1850, ludicrous. You would have thought 2000 BC, what? We're doing it now. This is an amazing man. One of my greatest friends on the planet, and it's such a privilege to say that. He's a 78-year-old Zulu shaman. He's the one on the left, by the way. Called Credo Mutwa. I met him first in 1998 when I first went to South Africa, where incidentally they dubbed me anti-Islam. You know, I'm getting a complex, you know. And we talked about the Illuminati, which he knows all about in Africa, because that glorious continent has been crucified and raped by this system. And we also talked about the extraterrestrial connection to the Illuminati. And we talked for hours, that's as far as it went. I went back this August, or last August, 99, and he'd read The Biggest Secret by this time, and the moment I kind of started circulating in Johannesburg, he was on the phone to me. I must talk to you, I must talk to you. And I went to speak with him, and he tells, and I've done a couple of videos with him, because once he started speaking, I thought, he's 78 years old, he's an ill man, diabetes and stuff, and I thought, he's got no one to pass this knowledge on to. And I thought, I've got to get this knowledge down, because my goodness me, it mustn't be lost. And I talked for him for hours and hours and hours. And he said, I've read the book, and I'm going to tell you what I know. I shouldn't tell you what I know because I was initiated not to, but the world's got to know this, not the few anymore. And he told me the story of Africa, the black African history. And what he told me was the same story that I'd uncovered around the so-called Western world. That a race of gods, which quite possibly started on Earth and went away and came back a long time ago, which is why possibly they think it's their planet, interbred with humanity, created hybrid bloodlines, and these entered the positions of power. Not only, he said, among the white aristocracy and royal families, but also the black African royal lines claim descendants from the same gods. And he showed me artifacts to support what he was saying, because being a Zulu shaman and one of the last, he is a man that attracts loads and loads of these artifacts. And he showed me this. This is called the Necklace of the Mysteries. It's called a necklace. It goes on his shoulders, and it's incredibly heavy, made of copper. And he says that it's at least 500 years old. It's been mentioned 500 years back. He says it's at least 1,000 years old. And it tells the story, symbolically, of African history. And at the front, in pride of place, you have an earth woman, and you have an extraterrestrial with a big willy. And how can I put it? On the necklace, that fits into that. And what that is symbolic of, 500 years back this is now, at least, is of this interbreeding, which is at the heart of the African, black African knowledge in this underground stream, which had to go underground when the Illuminati European controlled races came in and destroyed. As Credo said, they milked the minds of the shaman and then killed them. So if we move through this necklace, this is a closer up version of it. This is the Earth Woman. Now, interestingly, this willy here is now copper. But what Credo says is that in the original, or originally, it was gold. Now, this is in southern Africa. And this reflects, of course, and relates to this classic legend of the ancient Egyptian culture, the golden penis of Osiris. And when you go through, here's a close-up of the extraterrestrial, and I'll tell you about him. I said, did they really look like that, mate? And he said, no. And the reason for this will become clear as we go along. He said, these gods, they call them the Chitahuri in the black African shamanistic stream. He said, anyone that depicts us as we really look, instant death. So he said what the people started to do and had to do was to symbolize the gods in a way that made them look not human, but not exactly as they looked. And here's the Earth Woman. In fact, as I recall, I went out with someone like that once. Now, I emphasize, this is 500 years old at least. He says 1,000. This is hanging from the hand. It's a classic flying saucer. This is the side view. In the African sun, it's very difficult to take pictures. But this goes down exactly the same as up there. And I said, what's that? He said, well, according to the African historical knowledge, this is what the Chitahuri came in. He said they never came all the way in these. These, according to what we're told from the ancient accounts, they came out of much bigger ships and went around the earth in ships like this. Also, interestingly, when you look at the hand, now this is a few things here are going to become very important as we go along, because the talk layers, as you'll see as we go along, layer on top of layer on top of layer. This is just the foundations here. Here we have the sun, and the symbolism of the sun is massive in the Illuminati, as you'll see. Here you have the constellation of Orion. Now, lots of people who have investigated in the modern world UFOs and stuff have connected some of these extraterrestrial beings to Orion. Here's a 500 at least year-old artifact from Black Africa showing the symbol of Orion. Over here you have what has become known as the Star of David. Again, people think it's a Jewish symbol. Well, the Jewish religion uses it. In fact, it is an ancient esoteric symbol that can be found all over the ancient world, going back as far as you want to go. It seems to be a symbol to do with the fusion of spirit into matter, the fusion of male and female, the fusion of opposites into harmony. Now, in the center here, you have that image, the cross in the circle. That will become very significant as the day unfolds. But here, perhaps the most significant in relation to the Illuminati is the eye, the all-seeing eye. We will see, as this day unfolds, the fundamental symbolism to the Illuminati, all around us again and again, of the eye, the all-seeing eye. So I said to Credo, what's that? He said, that symbolizes the Watchers, which is one of the names they used in the ancient world for these gods. He said that symbolizes the Watchers, the all-seeing eye of the Watchers. Now, as the day unfolds, you'll see the significance of that in terms of the Illuminati. Interestingly, the arrogance of the European streams who think, and the arrogance of the modern world, where we think we're at the cutting edge of human knowledge. This is 500 years old, maybe 1,000. I keep repeating that for emphasis. This is on it also, and that is the depiction of the ancient Zulus of the earth. They knew it was round long before Galileo. Their name for time and space is almost exactly the same word, because they knew all that time back that time and space was the same.
But it's Africa and they've got black faces, so they must be not very bright. The arrogance of it. And again, all around the world, you see the depictions of gods, this recurring theme. This is in the Hindu culture, where they talk about gods in very advanced technology flying through the sky. Also, interestingly, Credo talks about the fact that these gods had elongated skulls. I took this picture from it's a member of the royal family of ancient Egypt. And it's a very, very round skull, elongated skull. Now, I have a picture, couldn't get the computer to download it this morning, unfortunately, of a skull found at Chichen Itza in the Yucatan, in the old Maya area. And it was found some time ago. I think it might even be in Vancouver now, somebody was telling me. And it's a mirror of that. And again, when you look at other depictions of Egyptian royalty, no wonder they had big bloody hats, you know. This elongated head. And one of the things that Credo said to me, he said, look, he said, there's still black African tribes today, you might have heard of them, who when their children are born, they bind their heads to elongate the skull. And he said, when I've gone to them and said, why do you put your children through this agony? The reply is because they have to look like the gods. And it's interesting, you see that elongated skull. This is from the Cairo Museum, just down from the Giza pyramids. This is a skull, I think this was found in South America. This was found in South America, again, the same thing. What I'm saying here is that there is far more to life and where we've come from and where we are than ever we are being told. Again, as Credo said, you know, whether they had big heads or not, they were imitating the gods with these big, high headgear. So, let's get down to it, shall we? Let's get down to it. So I then started thinking, okay, extraterrestrials, gods, interbreeding, bloodlines. And I wasn't really thinking, what did they look like? Because obviously your initial thought is, well, they must have looked like us then. And then I started on about 18 months ago, an amazing series of coincidences all over the world. People were coming up to me and telling me how they had seen people, overwhelmingly in positions of power, though not always, turn in front of their eyes into a reptilian humanoid figure and then go back again. And of course you hear one and you think, ooh. And you hear two and you think, oh my God, back burner. You hear 3, you hear 4, you hear 5, you hear 6 in different countries. 7, 8, 10, 20, 30. On my website, davidicke.com, there's 3,000 web pages now, and there's a whole area called the Reptilian Archive where people put their ancient and modern knowledge, research, and experiences, if you want to see how much there is to support some of this stuff. And so the story went that in 15 days, in one period, I met 12 separate people in 12 separate places who told me of this experience. Now, they were from many, many different walks of life. And I'm thinking, ooh, on the back burner, but I'll watch for this. This is strange. I then go to England, and I meet someone who I was due to meet to tell me about satanic ritual, which is fundamentally connected to this, as you'll see this afternoon. She was the wife of the head keeper of a place called Burnham Beeches, which is owned by the City of London, which is the epicenter of operational Illuminati control. And it's a forest area with a few clearings. And because she was the wife of the warden, and she says, my husband was a Satanist. That's why he got the job, because of the Satanism the elite did on that Burnham Beeches area at night. She said, and one day, she said, I'm walking through the forest, and I saw a light. She said, I went through to see what the light was, and she said, I saw a satanic circle where all the usual horrors were going on. And she said, I was astonished to see that the man I was looking at conducting it was Ted Heath. Now, Ted Heath was the Prime Minister of Britain between 1970 and 74, and was the man that took us into the European Community, now Union. And she talked about one of his Chancellor of the Exchequer at the time, Anthony Barber, was next to him in this circle. And she explained what happened and all that stuff. And so I'm thinking, wow, this is amazing stuff. Anyway, we talk about it. And then I'm just finishing the conversation. I'm putting my cup of tea down. Thank you very much. I've just come back from America in this experience of 15 days. And I just threw away a line at her. I said, do you know, it's a bloody strange experience. I keep meeting people that have seen people turn into reptiles. And I turned to go. And I heard this, like that. I turned around. She's having a bloody seizure. She said, oh, my God. She said, I thought it was only me. She said, oh, my God, I wasn't going to tell you that bit. And she explains how she saw this guy, Ted Heath, during this circle, turn, shapeshift into a reptilian humanoid figure. And she said, you know the thing that fazed me most? No one else in the circle seemed at all bothered, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I then get invited to go to the House of Lords to meet some lords to talk about the conspiracy, which they know is going on. They just want to talk to me about it. And there was a woman there, and she was saying some very interesting things about Diana. You know, Diana, Princess of Wales and stuff, Princess of Wales. And after the meeting, I said to her, hey, I want to talk to you. We've got to talk. She says, we have. I said, how do you know this about Diana? She says, well, my closest friend was Diana's closest confidant for 9 years. She says, I think I can get her to talk to you. So we talked. I talked with this lady. I didn't go to see this confidant of Diana to talk about shape-shifting reptiles. I'm hoping this thing might go out of my life and just kind of, you know, be a strange phase. Because, I mean, do I want to stand up and say about reptiles? Well, I don't really bother, but I'd rather not. Anyway, we're talking, and she's telling me about the horrific things that happened to Diana in relation to the Windsors, and how the Windsors take people out and stuff like that. Anyway, he then says to me, do you know what Diana's nickname for the Windsors was? I said, no, go on. She said, the reptiles and the lizards. And she said, Diana used to say to me, in all seriousness, they're not human. And she said, you know the Windsors are a reptilian bloodline. And I'm thinking, not a friggin' nother. And she explained, because this lady is a healer, and she worked not only with Diana, but with other members of the aristocracy and the lower levels of the royal family. And she picked up a heck of a lot of knowledge in this. It's amazing how many people know about this. It doesn't go to the public arena, because, I mean, who's going to have the guts to stand up on a stage and say that reptiles run the world? I mean, who's going to do it? No one's ever going to do it. We're never going to find out, are we? So this went on and on and on. If you look in the Reptilian Archive of my website, you'll see just the constantly added stuff. The number of people that have had this experience blows me away. And the name that comes up more than any other, George Bush. There's a book by a lady called Kathy O'Brien, and she sees this as a holographic image. But when you put it together with all the other evidence, maybe there's another explanation here. She wrote this book in the early 1990s. Before I was into any of this stuff. And when this started coming into my life, I thought, hold on a minute. I'm sure I read something about reptiles in that book. So I'm flicking through it, feeling a right prat, looking for reptiles in the index. There it was, about 4 references. And she talked about how George Bush had told her that they were an extraterrestrial race that had taken over the planet. No one knew it because they looked human. And how he turned into a reptile in front of her. Now, of course, understandably, in these mind control projects, you think, oh, well, you know, it's a holographic image. It can't be actually literally true. But when you get this other stuff, suddenly it takes on a different light. She also talked about being with a guy called Miguel de la Madrid, who was president of Mexico during the Bush years. And she tells at some greater length in the book how Miguel de la Madrid told her the story of what he called the iguana race. He told her that an extraterrestrial race of reptilian origin came to the Earth and needed bodies, as he put it, to work through, to operate through. And how they interbred with the ancient Mexican people, because this happened all over the world, creating hybrid bloodlines, and that these bloodlines could take either human or reptilian form. And to quote her own book, he added, perfect for world leaders. And more recently, I've met more and more people who have come from the inside and said the reptilians are behind the Illuminati. And it's interesting that when you go back, as I did, I thought, well, you know,
time as we know it, a few thousand years, is actually nothing in truth. So if it's happening now, there must be references to it in the ancient world. Well, if you're looking for references to a serpent race, serpent people, snake people, it's absolutely friggin' enormous in the ancient world. And one example, the Nagas, the gods of the ancient Indus Valley, they said about them they could take either human or reptilian form. And it kind of sounds kind of amazing, but I was watching a film the other day, and someone said on that film, the difference between an ape and a human is 3% DNA. You know, and as I think it was Carl Sagan said, there are more potential combinations of DNA than there are atoms in the universe. This is the only humanoid form that's going to exist and evolve from that enormous infinity. Come on. And who dominated this planet for so long? The reptilian genetic stream. And I'm not seeking to demonize that. I'm just talking about one group that keeps coming up. I mean, the reptilians are just the reptilian genetic form is a genetic form. So what? I'm talking about one group within it. And we have a reptilian brain. The scientists call it the R complex. R for reptilian. And they say, interestingly, that from the R complex, we get the traits of obsession with ritual, not just like sacrificing people, but going to the supermarket at the same time every week. Oh, it's Friday, we've got to have fish. Why don't you have fish on Thursday? You know, be exciting, you know. Ritual, ritual, ritual. And as you'll see as we go through the day, the Illuminati are stunningly, breathtakingly obsessed with ritual. The R complex, the reptilian part of our brain, also produces, the scientists say, the concentration and the obsession with top-down hierarchical power over structures, the pyramids. And also, it's from, they say, that part of the brain that we get what we call cold-blooded behavior, being able to do things to people by being emotionally detached from the consequences of what you are creating for them. When I talk to a guy who's come out of the Montauk mind control project, they call them Montauk boys. There's been a lot of books written about this in recent years. He talked to me about this reptilian thing recently. And he makes speeches and does talks at conferences about DNA now. And I don't know, I'm not an expert on DNA, I'll just give this for information, make of it what you will. What he says happened, and is happening, is that this fusion of mammal genes with the reptilian genes, the hybrid, created a situation in which they could open reptilian DNA codes, close them, open mammal DNA codes, and close them. And they could switch between the two. What he's saying is that the DNA has open codes, which manifest as a physical expression, characteristic, and they have closed codes, which are dormant. And if these dormant codes open, or these other codes open, then they manifest a different characteristic. I didn't know this, but you know there are still people on this planet being born with tails. They call them in the trade causal appendages. When it happens in the Western world, they just whip them off and sort it you know, when they're babies. But in the third world, where they don't have that medical expertise, there are still people walking around with tails because a DNA code that would manifest as that characteristic, which should remain closed in this point of our body's evolution, has in that one person opened and it's created a characteristic. And he talks about how these particular bloodlines, and there are very few at this level, who can move between the two and open and close codes. And for some reason, drinking human blood, particularly the blood of blonde-haired, blue-eyed people, seems to be very beneficial to holding mammal codes open so that the reptilian ones don't manifest in the world around us, which will bring us later into why, when you follow these bloodlines from the ancient world to now, the obsession with blood-drinking, satanic rituals follows them everywhere. Now, when I started looking at this, I started scanning around, and someone sent me this. This is from a temple in Egypt, an ancient piece of artwork. And what you've got are the ancient Egyptians lining up here to give a
gift and offering sheep and stuff to their god. And when you get to the end of the line and you see what the god looks like, well, it's kind of very strange. It's not what you think the god would look like. And when I started scanning around, there's not that many absolutely literal depictions of reptilian figures, reptilian gods, but there are some. What Credo Mutwa told me is that the Chitahuri, which incidentally in Black African translates as the children of the serpent, the children of the python, which is what they call these bloodlines. He said because they were reptilian, they said, as I said earlier, never depict us as we really look. So the symbolism of the snake, the symbolism of the serpent became depictions of the gods. But you can find some, this figurine and others, of a reptilian humanoid figure with a reptilian kind of baby figure were found in graves in the Ubaid culture, which was in the same area that later became the Sumer culture that I mentioned earlier. China, where a lot of this interbreeding appears to have gone on in the ancient world, of course their whole culture is based on the dragon, which is another symbol, it seems, of these reptilian gods from the ancient world. Now, what I did, when I got some of these people together who had seen this shape-shifting situation, and I got them together with an artist, and I said, depict through this artist what you see when this shape-shifting goes on. Another person who talks about this is a lady who conducted sacrificial rituals for some of these people, including the British royal family. And she confirmed exactly, with indeed more detail, what Diana's confidant was saying about the Windsors shape-shifting in the way that I'm talking about. Now, these nodules on their head are something that come up again and again with such consistency that it's just amazing, and you'll see more confirmation of that in a second. And these are also kind of depictions of what people see when suddenly the mammal, the human form disappears, and suddenly they're looking at something else. Talk about freak you out. In fact, someone was telling me backstage just before I came on about a couple of friends of theirs who are like big guys and really grounded and into none of this stuff, who had exactly this experience, completely freaked them. And that was in Vancouver. Now, when I said to Credo Mutwa, what do this Chitahuri look like? He said, I'll show you, because he's an artist. And we went down this rough track to where he paints, and he said, that's what the Chitahuri look like. In fact, there are many genetic streams, but that's one of them. The eyes are something that constantly get described. The glowing yellow eyes get constantly described by people who see this phenomena. And indeed, when you go back into the ancient world, you see the same depictions. So what I said to Credo, or what I did with Credo, was immediately get hold of a television crew and spend hours interviewing him to get this stuff down. I'm just going to show you a little clip. It lasts about 6 minutes of this man. He's the most incredibly articulate, brilliant man, telling information he has never spoken about publicly before, not least because he thought people would think he was mad. So let's play the video. The question I asked him was, Credo, what did this Chitahuri, the children of the serpent, look like?
This is how a Chitauri looks like. It stands about 11 feet high. It is a very slender being which seems not to have a bone structure. Its fingers have no joints. They are more as if the bones in here were flexible. Some of the Chitauri have got 3 claws with a thumb. Some have got 6 claws with a thumb. And some of the Chitauris have got horns on their heads. And what surprises me is this. Some film producers, like the producers who make the films Star Wars often show creatures in their films which actually exist, which even the most uneducated of Africans who knows this Chitauli can identify. For example, in the new Star Wars film, what is it called? Star Wars or something like that. There is a creature who amazes me called Darth Maul. Darth Maul is a red and black being with a ring of small horns right round his head. That is exactly what the Chitauli look like. Some have got ordinary heads without any horns on their heads. These are the lesser Chitauli. But the royal Chitauli have got a ring of sharp horns all around their heads. And the very high Chitauli, like their king, Mubaba Samahongo, they have got very long horns which grow this way. Not that way like a bull, but this way like certain antelopes. Now, I just wonder where these film producers get their information from. And in one strange film which my student called me to come and watch was the thing called Stargate 2. Mm-hmm. And in that film, there was a creature, a very slimy, cream-colored creature with heavy wrinkles on its face. It was a spitting likeness of Mubaba Samahongo, the terrible emperor of the Chitauli.
Well, clearly there's a tremendous amount of knowledge of what's been going on and what is going on, which comes out symbolically through films and areas of communication like Hollywood. But the thing that I'm totally stunned the more I talk to you about this is because I've been all over the world having people give me descriptions of seeing reptilian type figures, particularly people in positions of power in the world, changing into a reptilian figure and coming back again. And what they describe seeing is exactly what the knowledge of ancient Africa talks about seeing. We're talking about the same people there, which is an astonishing confirmation. And the eyes is something that keeps coming up being described. Yes. Tell me about the eyes of the Chitauli.
Say, a warrior Chitauri has got eyes like a snake. These eyes are yellowish with split pupils and they glow in darkness. So if a Chitauri, a warrior Chitauri, one of the lesser classes, is hiding in a cave, you can see its eyes burning. But a royal Chitauri has got 3 eyes. It's got the yellow eyes, which glow in a strange, almost ice-like way, like jewels, like certain types of yellow jewel. And then they have got an eye in the center of their foreheads, an eye which doesn't close up down like a normal eye does, but which closes from side to side and which opens this way. Now this eye of the Chitauri is the eye that kills, because it can knock a man down just by the fire, the glare that comes out of it.
Is this where the a constant recurring theme of the evil eye comes from?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. In fact, Mr. David, I would like to share a little thing with you. It is this: the best way to protect an evil thing is to deny its existence. And if you talk about things such as the Chidauri, if you talk about things such as the Mandinda, there are many people who say to you, rubbish, this thing does not exist. Now, in this way, this great evil is protected by being denied. One day in my long travels through the world, I was in New York, in that place called Harlem, and I saw a graffiti on a wall along a passage, and the graffiti was, "There is no such a thing as the mafia, and we will kill any asshole who says that there is." In this, again and again, sir, in America, people deny the existence of the mafia, and by denying it, actually protect it wittingly or unwittingly. There are those who deny that a national and international conspiracy exists. They deny it ferociously, but by denying it, they are actually assisting it and actually protecting it. We must stop denying the existence of these things. We must stop saying that there are no Chidauri, that there are no aliens, that there are no Illuminati. There are.
Okay. He's an amazing man, and for those who seem to indicate from what they've said about me this week that by definition, if you talk of a global conspiracy, you are a far-right Nazi, maybe those people might ponder on this after hearing those words. Credo Mutwa had his son murdered, his house burnt down, and his body battered to the point of death for opposing the racist apartheid regime in South Africa. And what those that have their sweeping definitions and their lack of brain cell activity are saying is that he, as you've just heard, must therefore be a far-right, racist Nazi. The ludicrous of it takes the breath away. Now, one of the other things that people see is this kind of ethereal type, reptilian type figure, which locks in, again it comes up again, into these lower levels, these lower chakras, and almost like, as we've had repeated throughout history, people get possessed by this consciousness and it starts taking over their thinking processes. This is an interesting painting where a guy was trying to depict a race trapped in a time-space dimension which they couldn't get out of. And interestingly, he chose reptiles to depict that race. And again, one of the things that comes up is that somehow, at least part of this reptilian situation, is reptilians on another dimension, the fourth dimension, very close to this. And of course, like all dimensions, occupying the same space, like radio frequencies and television frequencies, who are manipulating this dimension by working through physical bodies. And that's an interesting depiction that he made of that. Another thing that comes up is the Draco star constellation, again and again and again. And it's interesting when you see the writers and the artists, how they depict truth in symbolic terms and so-called fictional terms. We have Count Dracula, And when you look at the stories of Count Dracula, you're looking at the recurring themes that surround these reptilian figures, from the royal elite, supposed to come from Draco, according to the stuff I keep getting from various people. And the word draconian sums up the Illuminati magnificently. And Bram Stoker, who wrote Dracula, was a high initiate of this very network, who, like many others who've written books depicting truth as fiction, had access to what was really going on. You'll see as we go through, if you reflect on the day, how all these different elements of Dracula in the story come back in the stories of this Chitahuri. Even the depiction of the devil, the classic depiction of the devil, fits many of the descriptions of these reptilian figures. The other thing that Credo talks about is the connection between these reptilian bloodlines and ancient Egypt. And one of the things he talks about is that some of these Chitahuri have almost like a cartilage-type growth, especially the much older ones. They seem to live much longer than we do in physical bodies. And it grows from the chin and starts to curl under, which is interesting when you see the constant depictions of that in ancient Egypt. And from what people who've taken part in these Illuminati satanic rituals tell me, is that some of the garb they wear sometimes has that on, depicting exactly that, because they're crackers about symbolism. Now, as we get through the afternoon and we start to look at how this reflects in our everyday life and tell the story of how we've got to where we are from these ancient times, we can see that the epicenter at operational level of the Illuminati today, in their manipulation of the planet, is in London, the city of London. Nothing to do with Tony Blair's government, although that Prime Minister Tony Blair is a fundamental puppet for the Illuminati. It's to do with the fact that the center of the secret society Illuminati network is epicentered in London, for reasons we'll get to as the day unfolds. And when you go around the city of London, the reptilian symbolism, and these guys are seriously into symbolism, is enormous. When you enter the city of London even, you have to pass flying reptile figures on both sides of the road. All around you see these things. This is the City of London crest. I took this actually in Burnham Beaches, that area of satanic activity which they own. And again, the flying reptile comes up. It's a constantly recurring theme. And this one is at a key point in London where there are more elite secret societies per square inch than probably any other place in the world. The epicenter of the epicenter. There is a point where the area known as the City of London, the financial district, meets a place called Temple Bar, which is called Temple Bar because it used to be owned by the Knights Templar, who will appear in the story as we go along. And Temple Bar is the place in London which is not only the center of the British legal profession, it is the center of the global legal profession network. And these two places, massive Illuminati centers, the financial and the legal, which always go together, meet at a certain point. And at that point, they've put this massive depiction of a flying reptile in the middle of the road. Just here, that's the City of London. Just here, that's Temple Bar. And there you have that in pride of place in the center of the road. It comes up over and over again. Some of these families, because as these bloodlines we'll see this afternoon came out of the ancient Near and Middle East, they went into Europe and they manifested as the European aristocracy and royal families. And when you look at these aristocratic families, again and again, this is the Marlborough family, based at Blenheim Palace, just north of Oxford in England, that one of the offshoots of whom was Winston Churchill, Prime Minister during the last war. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. And again, you have the crest, the flying reptile. It comes up again and again and again, over and over. I've got to press that harder. And this is another symbol, it seems, of this reptilian stream behind the scenes and behind our backs. The gargoyle. Again, when you look at the great cathedrals which this Illuminati actually created on ancient pagan sites, energy sites, and the castles and the stately homes of these aristocratic lines, they're flipping flying reptiles, we call them gargoyles, all over. This is Notre Dame, but again, you see them all over the place. These different reptilian flying reptile figures. all over the world. This is actually a courthouse in Dallas, Dealey Plaza. Dallas, it's got gargoyles all over it, just down from where Kennedy died. There's an airport at Denver, brand new airport, very strange place. Now, there was a guy who was the son of a German wartime U-boat captain who was brought in to build, he was an engineer, some of the underground bases in America. And he said before he died, very strangely and very suddenly, that he actually was involved in building an underground reptilian base underneath this Denver airport. It's a brand new airport. It's supposed to be, when you go into Denver Airport, very strange place, it's a plaque. It says, operated by the New World Airport Authority. Everybody's tried to trace that airport authority, New World, has never found it. And what do you find in this modern airport in Denver, on top of what this guy claims, who engineered part of it, is a reptilian underground facility? You find gargoyles of that kind. Why? They keep coming up again and again. Now, you find some also, I mean, obviously people make their own minds up, but you find some of these depictions also in the ancient world that have a very strange kind of feel in relation to the classic extraterrestrial that, of course, keeps coming up every time we talk about them, which is the grey. Now, it's interesting. Let me go back to Credo Mutwa here. It seems that nothing happens in the world unless it happens in Europe or America. So, we're still arguing about whether grey aliens were found at Roswell in 1947 and whether grey aliens exist. And in that enormous continent of Africa, which no one takes any notice of, they're just a black bag. They have actually been finding these beings because they die from time to time, and they have from time to time cut them up, the dead body, to see what the hell they are. And Credo has been at one of these, or indeed more than one of these events, and talks about it on the video. But let me tell you what he said. He said, you might call them greys in your area of the world, but they're not grey. He said, when you cut through the outer shell, he said, that's what it is. It's not skin. It's not an outer body. It's a phenomenal material which is immensely strong. Not very thick, but immensely strong. And in his own words on the video, he said, you have to not just have a sharp axe, you have to have a new sharp axe to break out of this, through this outer shell. He said, and the big black eyes, he said, are not eyes. He said they are very sophisticated material, you might call them goggles, which protect the real eyes from the sun because these beings seem to have a problem being out in bright sunlight. Dracula could go out in sun, remember? And he said when you break through, what you find inside is a pinky-colored being, and indeed in that state in Black Africa they're called pinky, those people that have found them. And they have scaled skin, like a fish, as he said, and their eyes go straight down like a reptile. They are an expression, an offshoot of the reptilian genetic stream. So, what happened as I'm putting together this research is that this interbreeding, which I'm focusing on in this area of the world, it went around the world in other places, as I've talked about, but from this area of the world has come the bloodlines which have manifested overwhelmingly as the people in the positions of power. They moved across by land through various periods of time. They went through the name of the Phoenicians round to Britain about 3000 BC. I'll talk about that this afternoon. And basically they populated Europe. But within these bloodlines, or within these races that moved across in their various forms to populate Europe, were these hybrid bloodlines, which again and again, as you do the genealogical research, which is very painstaking, ended up in the positions of power which moved the world in a certain direction. And I'm going to come to that in a second when we get to the bloodlines. Now, what these bloodlines did was create a secret society network, which I'll talk about in more detail this afternoon, which kept the people in ignorance overwhelmingly that the bloodlines existed, and also using things like inquisitions and what have you, sucked ancient knowledge and esoteric knowledge out of the public domain into the hands of the few so they could be in complete ignorance of what was really possible and who they really were. Press it harder, you prat. Prison without the bars. Over a period of time, there has been an evolution as these bloodlines have moved into the modern world from overt control by them manifesting as royal kings and queens and such like, where you know where you are, you're in a dictatorship, they aren't elected, they just come in by bloodline. There has been a movement from the prison with bars, which you can see, to the prison without bars that you can't. There's two types of control. There's the dictatorship you can see, Nazi fascism, Stalinist communism, apartheid regime in South Africa. You know where you stand. You can touch it, you can feel it, you can taste it, and you can focus on that because you know that's your controller. Now, dictatorships like that have a finite life because in the end, the human desire for freedom will at some point rebel against that. Much better if you move, and this is what's happened, from overt control to covert control, the prison without the bars. And what has happened is that as these bloodlines have expanded across the world, first going into Europe and then through the British Empire, which wasn't the British Empire at all, it was the Illuminati Empire based in Britain, and through the other European empires, these bloodlines came out to the Americas, to Australia, to Africa, the Far East, etc. And at that point, because of the empires, etc., and the colonies, there was overt control by the Illuminati in Europe. You knew where you stood. Look, we're a colony. They tell us over there, thousands of miles away, what to do. What has happened, particularly in this century, earlier in North America, is that they have given the illusion of pulling back that control through independence. But as they have, on the surface, moved out of Africa, moved out of America and out of Canada, they're not so much out of Canada, what they've left behind are the secret society networks through which they operate and the bloodlines which enter the positions of power. And I'll give you a wonderful example of what I mean. There's no better example than this. During the apartheid regime in South Africa, there was overt control. They knew where they stood. They had never had a vote. They never had a say. A small clique of white people were controlling the vast majority. You could see it. You could touch it. You knew where you were. As a result of that, a build-up of resistance both within South Africa and increasingly outside South Africa built up, and eventually the apartheid regime had to fall. That was overt control gone. But before, this is provable, before Mandela was brought from Robben Island and a blackface was put in the presidency, a small clique of European-controlled families, very small clique, controlled more than 80% of the stock on the South African stock market. They owned the diamond mines and the gold mines on which the economy depends, and they controlled the media through various frontmen. Then we had this massive movement to freedom. You give black people a vote every few years, but you stitch it up so only one party's going to get in anyway, so whoever's leading that is your guy. Now, 5 years after Mandela, now we have Thabo Mbeki, his successor in power. Many things have changed. On the surface they have. Underneath, nothing. The same people who during apartheid held all that power still hold it. The same families still control more than 80% of the stock on the South African stock market. They still own the diamond and gold mines on which the economy depends, and they still own the media through various frontmen, not least an Irishman called Tony O'Reilly, Henry Kissinger's mate and the Rockefellers' mate. So nothing has changed. All that's happened is we've moved from overt to covert control, but now, even though the same people are controlling South Africa as before, where is all this shout about human rights? Where are all the banner wavers? Human rights, apartheid, freedom! They've gone off somewhere else. Oh yes, South Africa's sorted. No! Just appears to be. And I talked to Winnie Mandela, who came to one of my talks. She seems to understand that this is what's happened. It's all a scam. And this has happened in Canada, still controlled from Britain. About time we got Madam off the bloody money, it seems to me. America still controlled from Britain. And of course the manipulation through Illuminati operations like the UN Food Program. Look what she said. Catherine Bertini, Executive Director of the UN World Food Program. Food is power. We use it to change behavior. Some may call it bribery. We do not apologize. Africa is free? Nowhere's free. We just lost the plot because we think it is, because we have a vote for a series of puppets controlled by the same people. Which puppet of the Illuminati do you want this week? Oh, I think I love that one. It's nice. She smiles nice. And whoever gets in power, the same things happen because the same force is in control. Now, this is stunning, it seems to me. Given, I'm going to finish the morning on this. Let's bring this from the ancient world in its tenuous kind of esoteric kind of way, whack bang into the modern world. When you do the genealogy, I said earlier that the Sumerian tablets and other accounts say that this hybrid bloodline, this Nephilim, as the Bible talks about, were put into the positions of ruling royal power, the divine right to rule by your bloodline. When you do the genealogy, and I've gathered together from different sources, some of which are trying to expose the manipulation, most of which are just genealogical sources. And when you pull it all together, and I have to say this is an interim report because it's so painstaking, some astonishing things start to appear. We're going to start, and this is one bloodline. One, and it's offshoots. It's very near offshoots. I've called it the Windsor-Bush bloodline. When you start to understand how this works, you are able, not through prophecy, not even through genius, to predict that George W. Bush, 3 years ago, is going to be pretty close to the presidency, if not in presidency itself. Here he is now one step from it as I talk. We start this bloodline with the ancient royal lines of Egypt, Sumer, the Phoenicians, another very, very advanced people from the ancient Near and Middle East, Babylon, which was seems to be the reptilian center of these bloodlines in the ancient world, Troy and Greece. Incidentally, what kind of happened was this Illuminati was based in Babylon, and when it moved to Rome, it moved its epicenter to Rome. That's when we had the Roman Empire. And then more recently, I'll come to this afternoon, it moved its epicenter to London. That's when we had the British Empire. Just a coincidence, nothing to worry about. So this bloodline comes down through Philip of Macedonia, the father of Alexander the Great, who before the age of 33, when he died in Babylon, took over the whole of that area you keep seeing on that repeating map. Egypt, Babylon, right up into India, etc. It took over the whole thing. This same bloodline comes down through Cleopatra, the Cleopatra, Julius Caesar, Mark Antony, Herod the Great, the king in the Jesus stories, and through the Piso family, a Roman aristocratic family, who, as we'll talk about a little more this afternoon, but particularly in my book, The Biggest Secret, and particularly on a website called the Piso homepage, the evidence is very compelling that the Piso family wrote the original gospel stories. Now, same bloodline, Constantine the Great, the Roman emperor, who in 325 AD at the Council of Nicaea took those gospel stories and turned them into the religion we call Christianity as we know it today through something called the Nicene Creed. The coincidences are amazing. It comes down through the Merovingians in France. Now, the Merovingians have had a lot of stuff written about them recently in books like Holy Blood, Holy Grail, and others relating to the same story, indicating that the Merovingians have a right to rule because they are the bloodline of Jesus. Well, I think some people have misdirected us in that way by genuine accident, and I think there are some, particularly one, if you look in my website, who is misdirecting us absolutely knowingly to think that it's some bloodline of Jesus when actually it's a reptilian bloodline. He's a guy who is actually the current head of an ancient society called the Royal Court of the Dragon. The Merovingians were the people that founded Paris. They came, they knew their bloodline came from Troy and the Trojan Wars. So they named Paris after one of the people involved in the Trojan War stories, Prince Paris. They worshipped an ancient goddess, which these ancient people very much did, called the goddess Diana, a goddess of the moon. Just outside the original Paris, the Merovingians, they built sacrificial chambers, underground chambers, for their rituals to the goddess Diana. Where they built those chambers is now called the Pont d'Alma Tunnel, where Diana, Princess of Wales, died in the car crash. Pont d'Alma actually means bridge or passage of the moon goddess, which is what Diana was supposed to be. That was a ritual murder when you see the massive symbolism and other evidence surrounding it. The Merovingians, they come through to the Windsors, we'll see that. Now, Charlemagne was the most famous monarch of what we now call France. Massively powerful. Many offshoots came from him. 33 of the 42 presidents of the United States, from Washington to Clinton, go back to this guy alone. How many hundreds of millions of people have lived in the United States since 1776? Hundreds and hundreds of millions. Not only that, they come from a pool of, a gene pool of amazing diversity to create the people we call Americans. You would think that of the 42 that have become president of the United States, there might be a bit of genetic diversity, bit of a chance. No. Because presidents are not selected or elected by ballot, they are selected by blood. And we're having another experience of that at this very time in America. Comes down through the Habsburgs, massively powerful, the most powerful family in the so-called Holy Roman Empire for centuries. Come down through the de' Medici family and the House of Lorraine. The de' Medici family and the House of Lorraine employed two people. Both of them did. And there's an interesting background to the two people they employed. One was called Christopher Columbus. Both major Illuminati bloodlines, this one massively so today, very much involved in the reptilian research, the area of Lorraine near the French-German border. And the other person, both of these Illuminati families with the underground stream of knowledge they were keeping from everybody employed, was a man called Nostradamus. The reason Nostradamus had phenomenal knowledge compared with the rest of the population, I'm not saying he was a bad man or anything like that, I'm just saying where he got it from. This underground stream that has been keeping it from the rest of us all this time, right to the present day. So the bloodline continues. Comes down through the Plantagenet royal dynasty that manifested out of France into Britain. King John, who signed the Magna Carta, the kings of England, Henry I, II, and III, the Stuart dynasty, the Georges, George III there, involved when the Declaration of Independence happened in the United States, through these Edwards to Queen Victoria, a German bloodline on the British throne, all the way through all these others up to the present day, Queen Elizabeth II, Prince Charles, and right down to the present day. It goes through the French royal dynasties, right the way through these to Louis XVI and his wife Marie Antoinette, who were both killed in the French Revolution. And one of their children, very small boy at the time, one of the princes, escaped that. And eventually, thanks to King George III of England, because they're all connected, he was brought to the United States under the name Daniel Peyser. When you do the research into the background of who really controlled the major industrial companies of America like Carnegie and Morgan, etc., you find that was the guy who owned the holding company that owned the flippin' lot. Same again, same bloodline. This bloodline comes down through the presidents, George Washington, again, a British aristocratic bloodline, through all these down to the present day and down to Jeb Bush, George Bush's son, who's governor of Florida, and George W. Bush, who has a great chance of being the next president of the United States. There we go. Here comes the son. God, he's shape-shifted. No, he's not. No, he's all right. No, he's all right. But it is amazing that when you start to do the research of where this bloodline goes, you can start to predict where these various people are going to come from in the positions of power. What a coincidence that during the Gulf War, George Bush, Dan Quayle, is vice president, and Colin Powell, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, same bloodline, all involved in the Gulf War. It comes down through the Scottish bloodline families. Scotland's a major centre where these bloodlines came out of. Comes down through Kaiser Wilhelm II, the guy at the time of the First World War. Maximilian, the Emperor of Mexico, he was a Habsburg. Down through the Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, and the ruling financial and business elite of today. And that was a very symbolic picture, I felt. That's straight out of a newspaper. They put those two together. I don't know if they're trying to tell me something or what. But this guy, Al Gore, is also the same bloodline. Hence, he's now one of the two running for president. And so's this, which answers one of the great mysteries of our time. When I was a kid, I couldn't work out why, wherever she went in this regalia, Madam had to carry this thing behind her, this train thing. Well, now it can be revealed. It was to hide a friggin' tail. So obviously, that's what it was about. And it's funny, you know, how this thing comes together. There's a newspaper, you might have seen it, called the Fortean Times. Well, when I started to get this stuff out, because everyone thinks you're a bloody loony, I ain't bothered, I probably am, but they put a front page on. They were going to they're taking the piss really, because, you know, being brainless is not essential to work for Fortean Times, but it doesn't help with promotion, you know. But they came up with this. Which is quite an interesting one. This is their front page. And it's kind of an extraordinary thing to get our minds around, that actually this stuff could be true. At the very least, as we move along in this, there is a case to answer and many questions about what the friggin' hell is going on. And it's interesting. I'll finish on this. Another 22 minutes little clip coming up. It's one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen on television, I must say. They wouldn't do it in Europe. But you have a Governor General, right, who is the Queen's representative in Canada. And they're just symbolic heads. They just do as they're bloody told. The real stuff goes on underneath and behind the scenes. But the way that this Illuminati have created this web works like this. I've been in 25 countries in about 3.5 years, and that gives me the gift of seeing that what appears to be happening in one country, if that's the only place you live, is actually happening everywhere. The same legislation's coming in, the same things are happening, the same solutions are being given to the problems. And the reason and the way that that can happen is this. It's a web. You have the epicenter in London, other places too, but particularly London. Then in the various countries, America, Canada, South Africa, wherever, you have what I call the bloodline branch managers. And what they do is orchestrate around them in their particular country, their sphere of influence, the financial, political, media control to bring into their sphere of influence whatever they are told to. So from the epicenter comes, now is the time to play this card. This is what we want to happen in the world.
Down it comes to the bloodline branch managers like the Rockefellers in America and stuff. And they then orchestrate their country to deliver what is being centrally demanded. So when you're people like me who are traveling around the world all the time, you're going, my God, this is happening everywhere. This is how it works. And so the Governor General in Canada is just a symbolic person, but it's extremely symbolic of the way it works, with the representatives of the different countries orchestrating that country in line with a central agenda. What happened here is that this lady, for people that don't know, I'm sure everyone knows here, I've just learnt it, used to be a television presenter, this present Governor General. And what 22 Minutes did was turn up at one of her official functions and ask a few questions. This is what happened. And that's an amazing example of the energy that's starting to change, where we stop running, we stop touching our caps and kowtowing to this network of control, and we start saying, I am me, I am free, and we start running it. And this world's going to be free for the first time in known human history, and it's going to be free in our lifetimes, because the momentum has started, and it's gathering all the time. Okay, I'm just off to get arrested. I'll see you this afternoon, okay? Thank you. We'll carry on the story. Thank you.
David Icke. David Icke, ladies and gentlemen.